On this rock, I build my church! What's happening, YouTube? My name's Immortal Coil, and today we're talking savage spirituality.
Even though I've been creating content for just under a year, it occurred to me that outside of the 136 subs who regularly listen to this program, not everybody really gets what I'm about. Now, broadly speaking, a collective of channels known as the Fandom Menace coalesced following the release of Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Now, the writer-director of The Last Jedi famously stated,
I would be worried if everybody across the board was like, yeah, that was a good movie. It's much more exciting to me when you get, a group of people who are like coming up to you and really, really excited about it. And then there are other people who walk out literally saying that was the worst movie I've ever seen. Having those two extremes to me is the mark of the type of movie that I want to make.
Well, mission accomplished. Unfortunately, the true casualty here was the lore and the storytelling and the lack of vision towards the mythos that was previously established in the Star Wars universe. Now, I say coalesced because this type of retconning has been applied to properties in the past 15 years, not only in the movies, but in comic books and other forms of entertainment. Now, what the Fandom Menace is trying to point out that this sort of thing is unacceptable if these entertainment companies truly deserve our money, since they form a very fundamental aspect of our personalities and our shared heritage and culture. We don't need our precious properties shat upon by suits. Take a movie like Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Prior to the buyout by Disney, you could walk down the street, and if you suspected somebody, a Star Wars fan, all you had to say was, "May the Force be with you." And you'd get the nod, you get the smile, and you knew that you were amongst your fellow people. Take a show like Star Trek. You could say something like, "Fascinating," or "Make it so," and you'd get the same kind of nod from Trekkies. Now the list goes on, but the recent trend by the studios hasn't been creating new content and new characters and new universes and new world building. There's only been a select few creators with the balls to go ahead and do that, but by and large the big moves have been for the huge studios to acquire properties through buyouts and then try to retcon them. Now, retcon means retroactive continuity, which is designed to fundamentally change your perception or reboot the properties that we hold dear. Now, in the case of Disney Star Wars, the effect has been very apparent, and as we approach the release of Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, this point's going to be driven into the ground by the Phantom Menace. With Star Trek, we saw that same thing with J.J. Abrams rebooting the movies, most notably Star Trek Into Darkness, where it was a remake of Wrath of Khan. And then with the introduction of new television series such as Star Trek Discovery, which totally changes Spock's entire story and character arc, and this new thing called Star Trek Picard, which if we are to believe Overlord Doomcock, hail Doomcock, is going to be Patrick Stewart passing off the baton, going on one wild space adventure with overpowered female, and then dying in the process and having a ship named after him, which will continue the voyage under the aegis of a strong female character. So that's what the Fandom Menace is about. What is savage spirituality? Well, it's not this, and it ain't that, and it ain't that. Although these guys are kind of cool, there is a component of this that undergirds my perception about why all this is happening. I wouldn't be lying if I said that incidents in my life have been straight out of the X-Files, that I've pierced the veil and came back from the other side. The key word here is social engineering. Now, social engineering is using the media, various outlets of it, to consciously affect people's minds and perceptions. A really good example of this, if you want to create a metaphor, is the movie They Live. Now, in this movie, Joe Piscopo, he's a regular dude walking around taking the world for granted. But after he runs into a street barker who is hawking pairs of special sunglasses, he begins to realize that the advertisements are behind a perception barrier which disguises their true intent. So, for example, a famous one is a billboard that says obey. There are things that say be docile and reproduce. And then the most striking is that certain people, beneath their human appearance, actually are non-human entities. Not only is that an example of social engineering, that's an example of trying to place subliminal suggestions into the parts of our brains that tell us what reality is and should be. Now, humans are social creatures. We have this desire to belong and to be somebody and to follow strong leaders and to be special and become someone. And part of that perception is unconscious hierarchy. You have to know the rules in order to play the game, and if people who don't have our best interests at heart are declaring the rules, well, then the game becomes something that it wasn't perceived to be. It becomes redesigned. Now, Savage Spirituality's goal is to point out that movies such as Star Wars, movies such as The Matrix, movies such as Stargate, gives us a glimpse into our unconscious memories of a golden era where humans might not necessarily have been more superpowered, but were more complete, more in balance with the universe. Think about what a Jedi or a Sith is. This is an elite warrior trained in highly skilled pugilistic technique, but with the aid of advanced technology, i.e. a lightsaber, and psychic and telekinetic skills, becomes something of an unbeatable warrior. Think about who Neo was. Neo took himself outside of his perception box, realized what the engineered reality around him was supposed to be, and then learned how to bend the computer code constructs into something that enabled him to perform feats that looked impossible to all the people who were plugged into the system and dependent upon its perception of impermanence in order to even function. Now I'm going to toss out a somewhat controversial bone here, because this is very, very close to what's actually happening. But before I do, the direct answer to why my channel is called Savage Spirituality is that I am a reminder to all of you listening that our latent ability to wake up, to embrace that sort of super scion within, and to quit playing the game would be to unseat some people who very much do not want to be unseated. And it's not just because of money, it's because thought creates reality. How you think and the emotion with which you think can be considered a food source or an energy source to certain people. And I would even hesitate to call them people. Now, if you want to know what I'm talking about, watch the first Stargate. And then these properties that I'm mentioning, they each were revolutionary in their own ways at the time that they came out. And they completely made a huge splash in public perceptions of what's possible and what could be, spurning human advancement in very many areas. For example, flip phone cell phones came straight out of the original series of Star Trek. Movies like Star Wars gave us that feeling that if we just had a knowledgeable teacher and trained, that we could do the stuff that Luke Skywalker was doing. And that if we learned how to see like Neo and figured out what the technology behind reality actually is, then we can bend the rules and do the stuff and unseat the bad guys. And that's a powerful shift in thinking. It gives you hope, it gives you momentum, it gives you inspiration. But grown-ups can't have that. And they don't want us to embrace that part of ourselves, as I was speaking. So by going in and retconning that stuff, they can take those hopeful feelings and change it into something more useful. reroute the main power, if you will. And that's what the goal of Savage Spirituality is about. So yes, going forward, I'm going to be speaking about pop culture, but with the caveat that what is actually going on is that they are trying to control how we perceive what is possible in ourselves. Because let's face it, storytelling is one of the most powerful ways to affect a psychology. Okay, before there was movies and picture films, there was radio. Before there was radio, there was theater. And before there was theater, there was the campfire. And all throughout the presentation of storytelling, from the idea that we could take a verbal story and add sound effects to it, or we could take a story and act it out and dress up and put on a performance, to where we realize that we can take the story and transmit it wirelessly through the air and listen to it on a box with all the sound effects and the orchestras. And then to its ultimate conclusion, where we have visual to go along with the story. And with today's modern computer graphics, we can make that story anything we want to. And that's kind of scary to them. Because let's face it, not many people have the attention span to sit down with a book nowadays. But if you put a book on tape, well, people will listen to it. People might not sit down and read parts of Genesis anymore, but they'll watch Stargate. So I'm here to call out bullshit, and I'm also here to point you back at yourselves, because you are so much more capable than you realize, and you don't have to be what they want you to be.
So, there you have it, a very basic understanding of savage spirituality. My name's Immortal Coil. Like, share, subscribe, drop me a comment. Let me know what you want to see covered on the next edition of Savage Spirituality. Check out my friends in the Fandom Menace. We're a group of channels dedicated to calling out the bullshit that passes as entertainment in 2019. And remember, if you can't be spiritual, be savage.